Hello, everybody, and welcome to chapter 22 of Bereishit as we continue to travel through Tanach. Chapter 22 has 24 verses, and it's found in the Koran Saks Chumash on page 130 and 131. This chapter tells the very famous story of Abraham's 10th and final big test, the Akedah. In this chapter, Hashem commands Abraham to offer his son Yitzchak as a sacrifice. And controversially, Abraham goes along with it. He wakes up early and he travels to Mount Moriah accompanied by Yitzchak. At the final moment, an angel stops him from carrying out his mission, and a ram is offered in Yitzchak's place. Hashem blesses Abraham for his faith and obedience, promising that his descendants will be numerous and blessed, and that through them all nations will find blessing. The chapter concludes with a brief genealogy linking this story to the next generation. Of all the biblical stories, this one poses a big challenge to so many people. How could Hashem give an instruction to Abraham to murder his own child? There are lots of answers, there are lots of interpretations, but perhaps we can just focus on one before we get started with our chapter today. This portion, the story of the Akedah, is read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And one of the main reasons for that is the link to the ram, which is caught in the bush and is sacrificed in place of Yitzchak. The ram's horn is a natural connection to the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. What's incredible is the shofar itself plays no role in the drama of the Akedah, but it draws our minds back to this moment when Avraham was willing to place everything on the line in obedience to Hashem, even when it made no sense, even when it seemed to contradict everything he had been teaching about the sanctity of human life up until that point. Imagine spending all those years trying to teach people about Hashem, trying to teach people about the sanctity of human life, only for God to seemingly change his mind at this most crucial moment. The truth is, Hashem never intended for Yitzchak to be sacrificed. This was a test of whether Avraham would be willing to go all the way, demonstrate his absolute loyalty to Hashem above all else. On this, Avraham passes the test. It's also interesting to note that this portion actually appears in our daily service. It's not said by many people because of time constraints, but in many Siddurim, this portion of the Akedah is included as the preamble to our daily prayers, perhaps as a way of realigning our focus each and every single day as we think about how far we will go to develop and grow our own relationship with the Almighty. With this introduction in mind, let's turn our attention now to chapter 22, verse 1. Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'eleh, and it was after these things. V'ha'Elohim nisa es Avraham. Hashem tested Avraham. Vayomer elav Avraham, and he said to him, Avraham. Vayomer hineni, and Avraham replied, Here I am. Verse 2. Vayomer, and Hashem said, Kach na es bincha, take your son, es yechidcha, your only son, asher ahavta, the one you love, es Yitzchak, Isaac, V'lech lecha el Eretz HaMoriah, and go to the land of Moriah. V'ha'alehu sham le'olah al achad heharim asher omar elecha, and offer him up as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. And as we know, the mountain that he eventually does show Avraham is in fact the site of the Holy Temple, the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi picks up on the strange way in which Hashem offers this instruction, and he pads out the conversation that must have taken place based on our midrashic sources. When Hashem says, Kach na es bincha, take your son, Avraham replies, Which son? I've got two sons. So Hashem says, Es yichidcha, your only son. He says, Well, I've got two only sons. One was born to Hagar, one was born to Sarah. So Hashem says, Asher ahavta, the one that you love. Abraham says, I love both my sons. To which Hashem finally says, Es Yitzchak, I'm talking about Yitzchak. He is going to be the one through whom your continuity will be guaranteed. We continue with verse 3. Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Avraham woke up early the next morning. Vayachavosh es chamoro, and he saddled his donkey. And there are echoes of the enthusiasm through which people take responsibility for their missions. Avraham saddles his own donkey in this chapter Pharaoh saddles his own horses when he's excitedly going to pursue the Jewish people. Bilam saddles his own donkey when he is excitedly going to go and curse the Jewish people. There are different instances where people are on missions, just like Avram here, and they wake up early and they take all the steps that are necessary to get on with it. Here, Abraham is no different. Vayikach es shnei na'arav ito, and he takes his two young men with him, ve'es Yitzchak beno, and his son. And the sources point out that this entourage that's joining him and Yitzchak are none other than Yishmael and Eliezer. Vayvaka atse ola, and he cuts wood for the offering. Vayakam, and he gets up. Vayelech el makom, and he goes on his way. Asher amar lo ha'elohim, towards the place which God will tell him. Why is he bringing his own wood? Surely he will be able to find wood to offer up as sacrifice when he gets to the location. And again, this is just an indication of how far he is going to carry out Hashem's instruction. He doesn't want to risk finding wood that would be inappropriate to use for the sacrifice, and so he is taking the wood along with him. Verse 4, Bayom Hashlishi, on the third day, Vayisa Avraham es einav. Avraham looked up, Vayaris hamakom merachok, and he saw the place in the distance. Our rabbis point out that he could see the divine presence resting on this place. Yitzchak could see it as well, but the rest of his entourage could not, which is why we find in this next verse, Vayomer Avraham el na'arav, and Avraham told the young men, Shvu lachem po im hachamor, you will stay here with the donkey, va'ani v'hanar nelcha adko, I and the boy will go there, v'nishtachaveh v'nashuva aleichem, and we will worship, and then we will return to you. Since they could not see the sign that Hashem was leaving for them, this was an indication to Avraham that he should leave them behind. Verse 6, Vayikach Avraham es atzei ha'olah. Avraham took the wood for the offering, Vayasem al Yitzchak beno, placed it on Yitzchak his son, Vayikach biado es ha'esh ve'es ha'ma'acheles, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife, Vayelchu shnehem yachtav, and the two of them walked together. Verse 7, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham aviv. Then Yitzchak said to his father, Vayomer Avi, he said, my father. Vayomer Hineni v'ni, and he said, here I am, my son. Vayomer Hine ha'esh v'ha'etzim, he said, here is the fire and the wood. Va'ayeh haseh le'olah, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Verse 8, Vayomer Avraham, and Hashem said, Elohim yi'el lo haseh le'olah b'ni, God will see to it that there is a lamb for the offering, my son. Vayelchu shnehem yachtav, and the two of them walked on together. What's incredible here is that we often paint this picture of Avraham wanting to murder his very young, unassuming son. But we are taught that Yitzchak was 37 at this point. He is no wee young lad. He knew exactly what was going on. And yet, the Akedah is not seen as Yitzchak's test, it's seen as Avraham's test. There are many reasons for this, but one of the reasons is because Yitzchak himself had mastered an understanding of restraint and judgment, of midas hadin, and so it would not have been a challenge for him to follow through with Hashem's orders in this regard. For Avraham, though, he was full of chesed, he was full of benevolence and generosity, and so an act like this would have taken a monumental amount of trust and faith to be able to fulfill Hashem's wishes. But we shouldn't fall prey to the temptation of picturing some evil, cruel, vindictive God or some clueless, innocent small boy. We are dealing with tzaddikim who are building the foundations of the Jewish people and who understood at every step what was being asked of them. Verse 9, Vayavo el hamakom, asher amar lo ha'elohim. They came to the place of which God had spoken, Vayiven sham Avraham es hamizbeach. Avraham built an altar over there, Vayaroch es ha'etzim, and he arranged the wood, Vayakod es Yitzchak beno, and he bound his son Yitzchak, Vayasem oso al hamizbeach, and laid him on the altar, Mimal on top of the wood. This word, Vayakod, is the root of the word Akedah. He didn't simply tie up Yitzchak or tie him down. The process with which one does an Akedah would have been to tie Yitzchak's hands behind him and his feet behind him, And you can picture a very uncomfortable Yitzchak being laid on top of this wood. Verse 10, Vayishlach Avraham es yado, vayikach es hama'acheles. Avraham reached out his hand and took hold of the knife, lishchot es beno, to slay his son, to shecht his son. Verse 11, Vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim. But an angel of Hashem called out to him from the heavens, Avraham, Avraham. He calls out, Avraham, twice. Vayomer hineni. And Avraham said, Here I am. Verse 12, Vayomer, al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar. He said, Do not lift your hand against the boy. Va'al tas lo me'umah. Do nothing to him. Ki ata yadati ki yirei Elohim ata. For now I know that you fear Hashem. V'lo chasachta es bincha es yichidcha memeni. For you have not withheld from me your son, your only one. Verse 13, Vayisa Avraham es einav. Avraham looked up, Vayar, and he saw, V'hine ayil, achar ne'echas basvach bekarnav. He saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket bush. Vayelech Avraham, and Avraham went, Vayikach es ayil, and he took the ram, Vayalehu le'olah tachas beno, and he offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. Verse 14, Vayikra Avraham shem hamakom hahu, Adonai yireh. And Avraham named the place Hashem will see. Asher ye'amer hayom b'har Adonai yireh. To this day it is said, on the mountain of Hashem, he will be seen. Vayikra malach Adonai el Avraham. Then the angel of Hashem called to Avraham, Sheinis min Hashemayim, a second time from heaven. Vayomer bi nishbati ne'um Adonai. And he said, By my own self I swear, says Hashem, Ki yan asher asisa es adavar hazeh, that because you have done this, v'lo chasachta es binecha es yichidecha, and have not withheld your son, your only one. Verse 17, Ki varech avarechecha v'habar abe es zaracha. I will bless you greatly and make your descendants as many kachofei hashamayim, as many as the stars of the heaven, v'chachol asher al sfas hayam, and as the sand on the seashore, v'yirash zaracha es shar oivav, and your descendants will possess their enemies' gates. Verse 18, V'hisbaruchu b'zaracha kol goyei haaretz, and through your descendants will all of the nations of the earth be blessed, Ekev asher shemata b'koli, on account of the fact that you have listened to my voice. Verse 19, Vayashav Avraham el na'arav. Avraham returned to his young men, Vayakumu vayelchu yachtav el Be'er Shava. And together they set out and went to Be'er Sheva, Vayeshev Avraham Be'er Shava. And Avraham stayed on in Be'er Sheva. And now we take a pause from the narrative and we conclude these last few verses with reading about some more descendants and some more births, with the purpose of introducing Rivka to the scene. And Rivka will go on to marry Yitzchak. Verse 20, Vayhi acharei hadvarim ha'ele. And it came to pass after these things, Vayugad le'Avraham lemor, Avraham was told, Hine yalda Milka, gam hi banim le'Nachor achicha. Milka has also had children with your brother Nachor. Verse 21, Es Utz b'choro, ve'es Buz achiv. He's had his firstborn Utz and his brother Buz, ve'es Kemuel avi Aram, and Kemuel the father of Aram. Verse 22, Ves Keshed, Ves Chazor, Ves Pildash, Ves Yidlaf, Ves Besuel. And he's also had Kesed and Chazor and Pildash and Yidlaf and Besuel. Verse 23, Besuel Yolades Rivka. And Besuel had a daughter Rivka. Shmona Eile Yalda Milka Nachor Achi Avraham. Milka bore these 8 sons to Avraham's brother Nachor, Ufilagsho, Ushma Ru'uma, and his concubine named Ru'uma, Vateled Gamhi es Tevach, Ves Gacham, Ves Tachash, Ves Ma'acha. She has also had children, Tevach, Gacham, Tachash, and Ma'acha. And so as we conclude Parshas Vayera with this final verse, and we conclude chapter 22, we will be going forward into chapter 23, in which we tell the story of the passing of Sarah, Avraham's wife. But with these final verses of chapter 22, we have actually set the scene for life to continue, for the Jewish people to continue, through what will become the union of Yitzchak and Rivka. So that brings us to the end of chapter 22, and with chapter 23, we will continue to read about Sarah's passing and to read about the story in which Avraham purchases the plot of land to be able to bury her. I look forward to learning that with you soon. In the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful day.